Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome to Outpost Grip. If this is your first time here, super excited to have you. For all my repeat offenders, you guys are awesome. Jess, I saw that you were the first one already in the chat. Carrie, nice to see you. You guys see my awesome gear that I'm rocking out right now? Thank you. Thank you so much. Cybersecurity Central, Michelle and Kimberly. I love this. I would encourage anybody watching this, go and grab your gear. Kimberly, Michelle, I see you guys both in the chat. So if you can drop the link where anybody can buy this. Also, if you don't know about Cybersecurity Central, you need to go check them out. They are this central, hence the name, central location for all things cybersecurity. So definitely go check those guys out. So for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm your host, Jack Scott. And each week I come to you live on Thursdays to provide you education in cybersecurity innovation and technology. And how do I do that? I do it through providing panels, fireside chats, and one-on-one interviews like I'm going to be hosting today. So the individual that we're going to have on the show today, and I'm super excited about, is Christian Espinosa. We are going to be diving in and we're going to be talking about his book, The Smartest Person in the Room. So I'm really excited about this. His book dives into emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? What is a high EQ versus a low EQ? And how is emotional intelligence impacting us in the cybersecurity space? Christian goes by many titles. He's an author, he's a veteran, he's a founder, and this is even really cool. He's an Ironman triathlete, so we might dig into a little bit of that as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring our guest on to the show. Welcome, Christian. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing awesome. I love the backstage music.
Isn't that awesome? Anybody that's been on their show, it's a nice little green room and you can kind of see what's going on, but you really don't have any power or control to do anything. You just sit there. We have a private chat so we can chat with each other behind the scenes. That's about it. Yeah. So you looking forward to this? You ready for this? We've planned this. Oh gosh, it's been a couple of months. I feel like I had to reschedule a couple of times.
Yeah, I'm glad we're finally able to connect. It's awesome.
I love it. So let's kick it off, Christian, with you telling a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get in the space? Why did you decide to write the book? Take a couple of minutes, please.
I did communications in the Air Force. That was my first assignments. I did computer communications, and there was an element of information assurance or cybersecurity, we now call it, back then. And when I separated from the Air Force, I knew I wanted to get into IT and with a focus on security. So when I first got out of the Air Force, I was a defense contractor focused on cybersecurity, working for the Air Force. It was an organization called ScopeNet. We traveled to all the Air Force bases and helped secure them and optimize their environments. And then I did some work for DHS. I did some cybersecurity exercise planning with Black Demon and Bulwark Defender and Cyberstorm. And then I went for worked for a commercial company. And my whole career has been focused on cybersecurity. With a commercial company, I worked on aircraft, so helping secure commercial aircraft from being hacked when the plane is pulled up to a terminal or while the plane is flying. And then after that, I did some freelance work. I probably taught, 10,000 students in various boot camps, from Security Plus to reverse engineering malware. And the whole time I was also doing penetration testing on the side. And then I started my own company, Alpine Security, in 2015. And my book is really about my entrepreneurial journey with my own company and all the challenges I had in relation to my personnel not having a high EQ, but having an extremely high IQ. And that journey and what I did in my own organization that worked is ultimately what became what I wrote about in the book.
Yeah. How did you even become, because a lot of people don't know what EQ is. So can you take a few minutes and just explain EQ, and then I'll do my follow-on question. But what is EQ, emotional intelligence?
Right. So there's our rational intelligence, which a lot of people measure by IQ, your intelligence quotient. Then there's your emotional intelligence, which is typically measured by your emotional intelligence quotient, or EQ. And what EQ really is, and what emotional intelligence is it's really people skills and social skills, and being able to be in tune with your own emotions and how your own emotions affect your decisions, and then being able to understand somebody else's emotions and how to interact with them based on how they may be feeling, and conversely on how you may be feeling.
So how did you get engaged with emotional intelligence? Because when I first became aware of emotional intelligence, it was through my own personal self-reflection of life. And I got a hold of, this was in 2015, and I got a hold of the emotional EQ. What is the book? 2.0, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I think is the most well-known book. That was the one I read. And you take the EQ test at the beginning, and you take it at the end after you've read the book. And that really opened me up to a lot of like self-reflection within myself, because EQ, you can develop, you can grow. And so when did you start becoming aware of your own emotional EQ?
I don't know if there's a defining moment for when I became aware of it. I've done a lot of personal development work, from Tony Robbins seminars to my own stuff, to Brendon Burchard, to being a coach myself, having a life coach, doing different spiritual things. So I've kind of like been learning about it all along. And when I had my own organization as a CEO and a leader of a company, it's not about how technical you are. It's really about how you can handle different situations with people and with clients. And it really highlighted for me the importance of that emotional intelligence. Because if you're doing penetration testing, you can get by with a little bit less emotional intelligence, but it certainly helps. But if you're running an organization and dealing with clients and your own team, it is almost a necessity.
Have you taken any of the emotional intelligence tests?
I took one. I don't remember what the name of it was. Not too long ago, and I think it was. I don't remember what it was, but I scored pretty well on that one. If I would have taken the same test like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have scored very well.
That was what I was going to ask. Do you know, so you've developed your emotional EQ, and you know where you were to where you're at today and how much you've grown?
I don't know how much I've grown. I have grown a lot. I have a long way to go still. In my book, I talk about the smartest person in the room, the person with the high rational intelligence or high IQ that gets their significance from being smarter than other people. And that person used to be me. Like if I reflect back on my career 10 years ago, I would say even like 10 years ago, I was the one that was trying to be smarter than other people, looking for an opportunity to show somebody that they were wrong and I knew something they didn't. And it's just been a journey realizing that was keeping me at a glass ceiling, not just in my career, but in like relationships and pretty much all aspects of life. Because if you're always trying to be smarter than somebody, it doesn't really offer a path for a connection with that person, or an opportunity to build a relationship, or to build your network, because I'm a believer that your network is your net worth. And it just holds you back in a lot of ways we don't even realize.
Did you say you do believe that your network is your net worth, or you do not believe?
I do believe it.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. And I was curious. I'm like, he doesn't believe that. Let's dive into that a little bit. And yeah, because you talk about your network is your net worth, but with emotional intelligence, something that you said that I want to touch on was not being the smartest person in the room. And that is ego. That's an ego-driven mindset that we have. And we see a lot of that in this industry, is, because it is a very cerebral heavy industry. And there are a lot of intelligent people. And your book goes into a lot of this. I've read 75% of your book, and it is very much around your experience of when you launched your company and dealing with certain engineers and their mindsets. But so you're talking about like that, moving from that ego-driven mindset of being the smartest person in the room to leveraging your emotional intelligence. But like, how are there tips and tricks? How did you learn that? Because that's a tough shift from silencing the ego in a way, and then leveraging your EQ to be effective. That's tough.
Right. Uh, for me, I felt like it was something I had to learn. We never realized we're at a glass ceiling. That's why they call it a glass ceiling. Um, but I felt like I was at a glass ceiling and kind of stagnant in my relationships, in my career, uh, with growing my business, with building my network, and all these things. And I realized it was because of my own insecurity, and that's why I call my methodology in the book the secure methodology. I think a lot of what we label as ego stems from insecurity. And for me, I felt like I got my significance by being smarter than the people, and I was really insecure. So if I felt threatened if somebody was quote smarter than me, and it wasn't coming from a good place of being grounded. So I realized that once I started working on myself and becoming more secure internally and more grounded internally, then the ego played less of a role. I've realized that, you know what, I don't need to be the smartest person. I don't need to do these things. I need to like approach a scenario or an interaction with someone from a way or a position of how I can add value versus how I can, stroke my ego or make myself better. And when I made that shift to looking at in this situation, which I believe is about self leadership as well, how I could add value to my interaction or how I can make somebody feel better or appreciated or understood, then things started shifting quite a bit. And that's going from, looking at your ego to actually looking at what helps in a scenario with somebody else.
And what I'm hearing from you is you did a shift within yourself to stop being so selfish in a way to being selfless, to start looking at ways of how, and you mentioned like, how can I make this situation better, make this person better, help this individual? Is that how you look at a lot of things in your current life now, is when you go into it, instead of looking at it, because we typically, you'll see, those salespeople that it's about a sell and you're in sales. It's about a sell. It's about them. How have you noticed that you've taken a shift where when you walk in and you start working with your clients, it's how you can help them better their mission?
Yeah, it's not like I'm perfect and have perfected this thing. There's a question I try to ask in my head, like, how can I add value? And I try to repeat that question whenever I'm in a situation. And that's just a grounding question to remind me, like, if I'm not adding value to this interaction, then I need to change my behavior. And this could be something as simple as like, if you're out to dinner with somebody and they're doing something that annoys you, we tend to like want to say something, but if that is not going to add value to that person, then there's no point. It's just going to derail the evening or the dinner. And with me, that's just a constant reminder. And I think in the past, and then there's a concept of a primary question, like what question always runs through your head. In the past, my primary question was more along the lines of, how can I be more significant, or how can I be viewed as the expert, versus, and that's, if you have that question going through your head, that drives a different behavior from you, then how can I add value to this situation?
I love these, and I'm writing them down because these are what I like to call trigger words or trigger attributes, where when I have been trying to shift my mindset into something, you should see my desk. It is literally like I peppered with sticky notes all over the place. To like, one is up here on my light. It says stop and celebrate. And I put that there like a few months ago to help me start looking at the small micro accomplishments, as simple as I wrote that email to X individual and I like celebrate because it was an email I needed to get off, whatever that is. Yeah. So some of the things that you're talking about are triggers, or like trigger words, trigger things to help like restructure rewire your brain to look at things differently. And you use the analogy of being at dinner and somebody is annoying you, and one of your triggers is, if I say something, will it add value to the situation? How did you come up with that trigger to help you identify as one of your things, to take a moment and like evaluate the situation and be like, okay, will this benefit the situation or not?
I came up with that I think ultimately because I think people only remember how they feel when they're around you, how you make them feel, not what you say, not what you do, but how you make them feel.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same with anybody. It's not just on a personal level at work, with a client or a prospect. It's the same thing. They want to feel understood, valued, and appreciated. And when I shifted to, how can I add value, I was looking more along those lines. And I thought as someone trying to contribute to society and as a leader, I think leadership starts with self-leadership. I need to approach a situation like how can I add value to the situation versus, what's in it for me. And I think also that life gives more to the giver than to the taker. So through my experience, as I've given more or found ways to add value, things have come back to me like tenfold.
Did you grow up in a family how do I say that? Yeah. Did you grow up in a family where you were already taught, it was already part of who you were to be a giver? Or did you have to really create this in yourself later in your adult life?
I had to create it myself. I grew up in a very chaotic family on poverty and food stamps in a trailer with a drug addicted mother. So my family life was very chaotic. There wasn't a lot of values instilled in me. It's things that I think we inherently know uh, when we're born, but through conditioning and domestication, as some people call it, a lot of these things are sort of like beaten out of us, or we forget about it. But I think they're inherently there. It's just we have to remind ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that anything can be learned,
Mm-hmm.
anything. I think that change is hard, as we know. Change is uncomfortable. It's not so much, it's hard, but I think it's the uncomfortability that makes it hard because it's out of our comfort zone. And I think anything is possible. One of the things that I always say is my mantra is I'm not my genetics. Because if
Mm-hmm.
I was, I wouldn't be doing this live stream right now, and you wouldn't be a friend of mine in my network because I would not have changed my mindset to be where I'm at today. But it takes a lot of work, and it takes using like trigger words. It takes your circle, like your circle of influence, in having those 5 people that influence you the most, the 5 people that you look up to or you want to emulate in a way, to really help you make those shifts. So you came similar backgrounds. Like my childhood was very, we'll use the word chaotic. It was not structured. It did not provide me a lot of good foundations. But what it did and provide me, and probably the same for you, is a lot of resiliency
Mm-hmm.
for to have, like, I can withstand a lot in my life. And have you noticed that because of your childhood and going through that to where you're at today, that you had a lot of resiliency, which has allowed you to have the strength to do the necessary mind work to raise your EQ to get you to where you're at today?
Absolutely. I believe my childhood did give me a lot of resiliency. It also gave me drive. And I used to have a lot of like heartache or resentment about my childhood and my mother in particular. And I shifted that because I think life really has no meaning. The only meaning to your experiences is the one you attach to them. And for a while, I was attaching, like, why couldn't I have like a normal childhood? Or why couldn't my life have been different? Sort of like, why was my mother like this? Why did she OD? And all these things that weren't serving me. But when I shifted that meaning to something different, then I realized that my childhood actually helped me because that chaos and the way we grew up very poor gave me the drive and the motivation and the resilience, as you said, to get out of that environment, and then also realize that I went through that scenario, so pretty much whatever's thrown at me I can easily handle. So I shifted the meaning of that to something that served me versus something that held me back.
When was there and Jess, I see your question. I'm going to definitely ask that. But I want to like dive into this a little bit more with you, Christian. So can you think of, because I have pivotal times in my life that I hit rock bottom, or that there was just something that was so catastrophic enough that forced me, like the universe forced me to make those changes to be where I'm at today. Were there any of those things in your life when you like when you launched your company in 2015, because running a company is not easy. Did you have these changes that really forced you down the path to start doing more self-reflection and go to Tony Robbins camps and do those things to really help raise your EQ?
I think it was a combination of circumstances. Certainly when I had my company, there were moments where, I was one account receivable away from like bankruptcy, and be on the floor like in the fetal position, like crying a couple times, thinking, how am I going to figure this out? The necessity was very high to figure it out, and I figured it all out, but it was very challenging. I think the moment for me that sort of shifted my paradigm on the meaning of life, or how you define that, was this event called the Landmark Forum. I went to this event in LA, and it was an extremely uncomfortable event for me. Like you had to do a lot of sharing of trauma, things you went through. You had to talk to your neighbor and do a lot of group exercises. And I was so like uncomfortable that at the first break, I thought about going to my car and driving away and never coming back. I was like, this is too much. But what I realized is like, I need to go through this in order to transform. Transformation doesn't happen by doing the same thing over and over. So I went through that event, and that's really an event that solidified to me that all these things that were holding me back and these experiences I had, and with other people as well, if we just shift the meaning of those things, then that to something that serves us, and we're in control of that. We choose what meaning we attach to an experience or to something that happened to us. That allowed me to move forward a lot quicker than I was.
Yeah, you're making me think of Deepak Chopra, who talks about like quantum physics and reality, and our reality is literally, my reality is my reality. Your reality is yours. And one of the things that was hard for me to learn because of my childhood was identifying that people can't make you feel a certain way. You make you feel a certain way. So people can act however they want. It's you're in charge of your own responsibilities. But I was raised to be impacted by people's emotions and how they reacted. And I allowed the outside world to influence. And I would get so irate or angry at how somebody was reacting or how I thought they were treating me. But something I've learned with the rewiring and the readjustment is once you start looking at things differently and you start taking a step back, you can start making changes a little. I noticed I could start making changes a little bit easier because I started understanding the process of it. Meaning, they say a habit, it takes 21 days. It takes me longer than that, but a habit, 21 days, and you're in a habit. So my mindset is I break down when I'm trying to make a change, and I break it down into what's entailed. How will my body feel? What are some of the effects of when you first start going in and seeking change? Maybe it's a fitness plan. What is that going to look like for you? And then going through that process, but realizing if you stick with it and you are consistent and you are focused and you are determined, you will see the change. And I think for me, that's all I need to know is like, if I stick to this plan and I do these things, I will see the change and I will be successful. And I just block everything else out. Have you ever noticed that you do that? Or are you one of those people that you seek change and you're just like, boom, done, the change is going to happen. You block everything else out? Or do you have a process to it? How do you, when you're going about wanting to change something inside of you, to shift something, what are kind of tips and tricks that help you to get through that uncomfortable phase?
That's I do something similar to you, and that's a good question. For me, I tend to look at what I'm going to gain versus what I'm going to lose. A lot of us, when we are faced with a change, like if we're going to start going to the gym, we thought, well, I can't eat chips anymore, I can't do this, or we'll change our diet, I can't do all these things, versus looking at the outcome of what you can do or what you will be able to do when you've gone through the change. So I think focusing on that helps. And then understanding your why or the reason you really want to do it from not an intellectual perspective, but an emotional connection perspective. There needs to be some emotion behind the driving force for you to change. Otherwise, as soon as there's an obstacle that comes up, you're going to just say, I'm not going to make this change. It's too difficult. And then the other thing I do is realizing that with any change, kind of what you mentioned earlier, Jax, about like the minor celebrations, celebrating small things.
Yeah.
With any change, it's going to be a journey. It's not just like a light switch you can switch on. And there's going to be incremental improvements that happen as you make that change. And it's important to celebrate those incremental improvements and realize that as long as we're improving a little bit, we're on that journey to getting to our outcome, that's okay. We don't need to just flip everything in one day or even a month. It takes time, and that journey is what we should be rewarding ourselves for.
100%. Yeah. Because I have so much on my plate, one of the things that I've been doing recently so I can stay consistent with going to the gym every morning and still maintaining full-time grad school and full-time work and doing these live streams, but still having enjoying doing these live streams, because that's where burnout comes. And for me is like today I slept in because I was really tired. So I got an extra hour of sleep instead of going to the gym. But for me, it's like a little bit is better than nothing, And when I got back into fitness, because I got out of it because I got really injured because of a head injury. When I got back into it about a year ago, it sucked. I was weak. My cardio sucked. And about even just like 4 months ago, I was still only going to the gym and I say only, but it's for me. I was only going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, but I made it there for a while. I was only going to the gym 1 day a week. And then I got to 2, and then I got to 3. Now I'm up to 6. But it took me almost 8 months to a year because I would hold that 1 day going just 1 day. I would do that for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, or until I felt comfortable. That's another thing is if I'm feeling resistance to move into that next phase, then I stay where I'm at. And then I kind of journal. And I was going to ask you, do you journal whenever you're starting to have resistance within changes that you're trying to make? Because there's times I get into wanting to make big changes in myself and there's a lot of resistance. And sometimes you don't want to push through it. Sometimes you want to sit there and do some self-reflection. Do you do that? Do you do that consistently? What does that look like for you?
I do journal, particularly when I'm going through something difficult. I usually do it in the morning and before I go to bed. And I'm not always consistent with it. I do find that when I journal, a lot of clarity comes through the writing, especially if I do it for on one topic for a few days in a row. Then I get my thoughts out and I have clarity on that. And I also do the 5-minute journal, which helps as well, because it gives you like an exercise, like how you can make each day better at the end of the day. So I definitely see value in journaling. And when I haven't done it, I've noticed a sort of stagnation in my development or my ability to keep doing something. And the other thing I do when it comes to like forming a new habit, like you were talking about going to the gym, is I like to try to shift my identity. So, or put an identity on myself. Like since I do Ironman triathlons, I like to say, if I'm an Ironman athlete, would I be doing this or should I be doing that? Because if I'm going to identify as a particular label, then I should be doing the things that go along that label. And then pretty soon our identity shifts because we've done those things, we've become what we've labeled ourselves as. So I think that's important as well.
I think that's a very good point to highlight. Okay, I'm going to bring up Jessica's question really quick. All right, Jess, we're getting to it. All right. Have you had to, and this was when we were talking, I was asking you about the sales job, like what you do for work. So she was asking you, have you had to shift tactics or avenues of approach to clients since so many people have started working remotely?
I don't think so. Not me. With my company, Alpine Security, I built it from the ground up, working remotely. So we had an office, but everybody worked remotely. So that within itself required a lot of cultural changes. And I established a lot of things at the very beginning, such as having people, wear a polo shirt or something professional when they're on camera with a client, making sure their background was clear, making sure they had a decent camera, a decent mic, and a lot of things that help build a connection with a prospect or a client. And then also doing a lot of things I wrote about in my book, teaching better communication skills, ways to build rapport with a client, because it's a little more challenging to build rapport and often to communicate if you're doing it remotely. But we had been doing it remotely for so long that we kind of got that process down, and it's a little bit odd today for me because when with my company, our policy was to always be on camera. And then when I'm with a new prospect or someone they're not on camera, it seems awkward because I can't see their movements. I don't feel like I'm connecting with them as much. So I think there's a lot of things you can do, like, you know, being on camera, dressing appropriately, having the right things in the background, teaching your team how to build rapport, how to ask more questions than talk, and how to actually actively listen as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I loved it. Yes, active listening. And that's part of emotional EQ. It's like active listening to people and their conversation instead of what we will sometimes see, which is waiting to respond before the individual has even provided you their explanation. Did you ever, for me, I noticed that I wasn't very good at active listening when I first got into just identifying and working on my emotional EQ. And I think that was because of my childhood, because I was always I was fighting to be heard. It was always an argument in some way. And then I joined the military, and that didn't really help with the areas that I had weaknesses in, especially within the EQ. Did you notice yourself when you started going through and assessing yourself, did you notice that you were naturally good at active listening, or was that something you had to work on?
I thought I was good at active listening, but I don't think I really was. I was actively listening for a moment just to talk, I think in the past, versus listening not just to what the person is saying, but what they're not saying and how they're saying it, which I believe is active listening. Because I think people are telling you everything you need to know about them just by, and you, if you're actively listening, you can pick it up about the person. It's not just what they're saying, it's also what they're not saying and how they're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So today I'm much better at active listening. I am very curious about people, so I like to ask questions, and I can have a whole conversation with someone where I don't really say hardly anything about myself. But the irony is that person that I have the conversation with will often feel very close to me, even though I didn't say anything about myself. But the fact that I'm actively listening and showing somebody, giving them my attention, which a lot of people don't get attention at all anymore, makes them feel connected to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the best book I read was Never Eat Alone. I think I read it in about 2016, right around the time I was doing a lot of self-reflection, starting to do more self-reflection. It completely changed my mindset of how to do networking, because I am naturally introverted, and networking used to stress me out because I feel like I would go into a room and then I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these people. And that book really helped me create a strategic approach of networking. And it was exactly what you're talking about, which was, now I go in, I actually try to identify 3 people beforehand who I know are going to be at the conference. I already have talking points in my hand, verbally speaking, notionally speaking. And I will go in there with a point to talk to them or with them and have them lead the entire conversation. And that has completely, it's a game changer, because now all the stress is off of me. I have a target. I know who I'm going to talk to. And the book, Never Eat Alone, really talks about engaging with somebody and talking to them to learn about them. And you don't even introduce yourself in a way of like your background, except for your name. You could walk away and they could have just thought you were the most amazing communicator and individual they've ever talked to. And the entire conversation, you were just chatting, but you were having them talk and share about themselves. And it completely changed now how I talk and communicate with people and how I network. Have you ever caught yourself? I get awkward when you meet somebody that's similar and maybe read the book and they understand acting and they start asking you questions. And you're like, this is weird. And I will notice and be like, I have to pivot this back to them.
Right.
And I'm like, I keep talking too much. Yeah. I
felt the same way with people sometimes. Because I'm like, wait a minute, they keep asking me questions. I'm not learning anything about them. So I need to like figure out how to ask them questions. Because I'm like I said, I'm naturally curious about people. And I don't feel the need just to talk about myself. So.
I agree. Yeah, Ronald, that's so true. Too many people are worried about the next thing they're going to say instead of really trying to understand the other person's point of view. Absolutely. This is where we've got to get better at that. Let's dive into let's do a pivot. Let's dive into the book. I'm going to do a shared screen really quick of your website where the book is located. I shared this in the chat for everybody. But this is his website. I'll throw it back in the chat. Anybody it's on LinkedIn, I think this is only sharing to YouTube. I don't know why StreamYard won't share to LinkedIn. So you'll have to go over to YouTube or find it up here. But let's talk about the book. So why did you even go out and want to write a book? I wrote a book. It's challenging. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and it's not something that you typically do on a whim. So what encouraged you? What was your motivation behind wanting to write this book?
I felt like I went through this journey from being the smartest person in the room and getting my significance from that to witnessing the effect that had with personnel in my own company and making the transformation, the shifts within my company. So I felt like this is something this problem, the high IQ, low EQ problem, is a massive problem in cybersecurity and I think in other high-tech industries. So I felt like I figured this out for my organization. I think other people might benefit from this. So I really need to write a book about this. And it was more of a book because I don't like the status quo. So I felt like I wanted to help shift the status quo in cybersecurity and make people better. And that's the main reason I wrote the book, because I used to get extremely frustrated with cybersecurity and think, well, this is just the way it is. And I almost like left the industry multiple times because of that. So I thought, well, why not take the knowledge I gained through having my own company, through my own transformation, and package it in a book where people can also expedite their transformation if they choose to. And really that's why I wrote the book. And it was a lot more effort than I thought it would be. Like times like 100 basically. So especially I was traveling quite a bit, and I would be in like Portugal editing my book over the weekend, revising it, and there wasn't a lot of free time when I wrote the book. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, I had to take a break from college. I would be graduating this term ish if I had not, but it was totally worth it. And I wrote it with co-authors. So writing a book by yourself, I mean, it's just you and that's it. And it's a lot of work. And a lot of the examples that you provided were your real world examples of what you were going through when you were writing the book. Where were you in the time frame of writing the book and your company? Had you already sold your company at that time, or were you still working at the firm and writing the book?
I started writing the book in early 2020, maybe a little bit late 2019. I started like brainstorming and doing some ideology figuring out my ideas and tying them together. So this was before I sold my company. I wrote the book and finished it really around October 2020. I sold my company in December 2020, and then my book was published in February 2021. The publisher recommended I didn't publish it around Christmas or around the election time in January. That's why I waited till February.
Smart.
So yeah, I wrote it while I was running my company, while I was traveling during COVID, and it was very challenging. But I was determined to get it done. So, and it did have it did caused a lot of stress for me. And if I write, I plan to write another book, I'm going to do a little bit differently, because running a business, training for Ironmans, traveling overseas a lot, and writing the book is almost too much for me to handle. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently next time.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I can completely understand that. So you're going to write another book, and that was one of my questions. So what is your next book? Can you tell us, or is this a surprise?
So I had started on my next book. It was going to be a memoir about like the lessons I've learned through my childhood and other things. But then I've sort of like recently been shifting what I want to write about. And I had this notion, and I haven't fully, fleshed this out. I had this title in mind called The In Between. And the idea is to write it. We always focus on like the big moments in life, like a graduation or a wedding, going out to dinner, all these like from the weekend, all these big moments. And I think we focus on those at the expense of like the day-to-day, like micro moments. But our life is really about those small moments. It could be something very insignificant, but how you react in that moment or how you respond can make the difference in somebody else's life. It doesn't need to wait till this massive thing that goes on. So I'm thinking about writing it along those lines.
I love it. I'm buying it. You already have a buyer here.
Super.
I'm in there. Yeah, because that's the stop and celebrate is precisely that. It's taking time throughout my day to count my small victories instead of graduating school, which that is a victory, and I'm going to get there, but that is a far term. And when we live, and I do this myself, I'm pretty bad about living in the future because I have these pretty hefty goals, and I'm so focused and determined to getting to those goals. And I just like I said earlier, I block everything else out. But what that means is I block out those day-to-day micro achievements, those little things that are happening. I literally look at them because I'm a high achiever, and I go, I could have done it better. And I notice that I subconsciously do that. And so I've caught myself going, I could have done it better, to stop and celebrate. I'm like, stop, celebrate. That achievement is going to get you to this achievement. Yeah. And so I think that book is critical. I think we live in such a fast-paced world, and especially for higher achievers like us, we have got to be better at conditioning ourselves to take time throughout the week, throughout the day, to celebrate the small micro victories, or we're gonna burn ourselves out, or we're gonna be. I feel like I get myself into these rat races, and they're self-induced. Like I'm just spinning over here, and I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, these bigger things, and I'm like, no big deal. I'm focused on TED Talk. Me and Ted are meeting. It's how do you, because you're writing a book about it, and knowing you and your background, the reason that you wrote the last book is because of your personal experience. So is this book because of your personal experiences of you trying to make sure that you take in every day, every hour, instead of just those big goals?
Yes, I believe if you have a powerful message, the message should transform you. So as the author of the book, by writing the book, by doing the work, by doing the research, I should be transformed as well. So I need to do work in the in-between moments. Like I remember like I would finish an Ironman triathlon, like I did Hawaii. I finished like the World Championship Ironman triathlon in 2015, and I was automatically thinking about, okay, that was cool. What's the next big thing I'm going to do? Versus like actually taking a moment and saying, you know what, this is pretty freaking awesome. And this was like a 10-year dream for me, and here I am doing it. But I kind of just like downplayed it. And then I think when we're involved in a relationship with someone, and there's something about them that like they're late, or the restaurant's closed, or whatever happens, we tend to get frustrated and not think about, well, what actually is good about this moment, and what's great about this moment. And I think that's extremely important. And I find myself I still need to work on this a lot. I'm thinking, well, we're going to be late for this, but, as example, I'm not using regular examples here, but versus, well, at least we're together, and at least we have this moment now, versus looking at the things that could go wrong, or the things that didn't quite go right as well as we wanted them to.
Yeah, and that's sometimes hard. I had a boyfriend that I would get like really wrapped up in like if something didn't go according to plan, like the restaurant not being open, or whatever the situation
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
And he would be really good at being like, oh, but then at that time, because I wasn't as emotionally mature as I am today, it would frustrate me more and be like, I'd be like, how are you so outgoing and positive about this situation? So you have to give yourself ease and grace to move through that. Cause again, it's hard. It's challenging to like shift that mindset. And I look forward to the day, Christian, that I can be like super zen about things. And when things don't flow according to plan, I can almost do that kind of like, it'll all work out for the best.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm still want to have that control. And when things don't go right, I get aggravated, but I'm a lot better than I was. And I always say that I'm not there yet, but that is a goal of mine, is just like, so I want to ask, what is some advice that you can provide to anybody that's listening and watching this right now that is struggling with change? Maybe they're shifting careers, trying to break into the industry. Maybe they're like us, where they're super hyper focused on like day to day, or not day to day, but the long-term goals. Is there tips and tricks, anything that you can provide that somebody could start doing right this second today to start helping them take those micro steps to start shifting their mindset?
I think one thing is they could actually read my book. I'm not trying to make a
I knew you
shameless
were
plug
going
for
to
my
say
book.
that.
I'm not trying to make a shameless plug, but I talk about a lot of those concepts, how to make change. I talk about a growth mindset. Carol Dweck wrote a book about that. I talk about Kaizen, that mastery is a journey, and you're going to have some valleys you have to get through. So I talk about communication and how the meaning of communication is the response you get. So I think, and I also talk about acknowledgement, like we've been talking about, the self-acknowledgement. I think as you're going through a change, you need to acknowledge yourself, because it is difficult, and we have to recognize that it's challenging to make change. We also have to recognize that we have the ability to make change. We're not hardwired in our brain. There's this thing called neuroplasticity, where we can develop new neural pathways in our brain, but it's not overnight. It's just like a muscle in your arm. You have to work on the new habit to where it becomes like the default habit, and the old habit eventually falls away. I think we all are capable of much more than we think we are. It's just a matter of shifting our paradigm. And then also, as Jim Rohn said, we're the average of the 5 people we hang around with. So if we're hanging around people that are not the way we want to be, then maybe we should change who we hang around with, because that will by default change you as well, because we typically end up doing the things that other people do, our friends do, that we hang around with, and thinking those ways and having those conversations as well.
100%. Influence is huge, and it goes back to, your network is your net worth, and who you are around is who you become. They influence you. And that was in 2000, it was 17, 18, I was homeless. And it was when I really looked around, and I'm like, I'm in a really cruddy place right now, and my friends are kicking me while I'm down. And that was when I really had to analyze and reassess. And I always heard that saying, oh, you're the influence of the 5 people that are in your life the most. And I didn't really believe it until that moment in my life. And I remember where I was, and I decided, okay, I know I don't want to be here. I don't know where there is. I just don't want to be here. And so something that helped me to get to where I'm at today was I started looking at people that were in positions, not just wealth and not just status, but were living a healthy, thriving life from what I could see, because I either had a relationship with them in some way. So they had what seemed to be healthy boundaries, a good relationship with their significant other and their family. So these good foundations. And I started doing what they did. I started reading the books that they had read, started listening to the podcast they had listened to. And through that, it was a lonely time, because you have to clean out the closet and get rid of all those people in your life. Yeah. But through that, I was able to bring into the right people in my life and my circle. And because that is my network now, my net worth and who I am has completely shifted, and my mindset has completely shifted. So I think that's critical. I think that's honestly one of the first thing that you should do. It's hard though. Like if you're in a toxic relationship and you start trying to make shifts, it's going to be hard to make those shifts because the other person isn't going to want you to make those shifts. Likely they're not going to want you because you're going to start changing, and that's not what they want. So it's hard. Change is hard, but you've been really, really successful in your change. I'm excited about the second book. Is there any other big things that are coming up that you can share with us, that like any surprises that we need to be looking out for? Are you doing another Iron Man anytime soon?
Well, I had like a health issue where I had like 6 blood clots in my left leg.
Yeah, that's right. You did.
So I've been like sidelined a little bit, but I'm getting back to normal. I do have an Ironman in Alaska I'm doing. It'll be my first trip to Alaska, so I'm excited about that. That's I think in July or August. But I've been just trying to get over this blood clot issue. So
take it slow.
Yeah.
Ease and grace. Those are no joke. Look at you bounce it back, and now you're going to go to Alaska and run an Ironman. Oh my gosh.
That's the plan. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. So final thoughts, and then I'm going to take you off screen and do my wrap up. Final thoughts that you want to leave the viewers with for final notes or anything, any like final tips and tricks for them.
Yeah. We've kind of talked about this throughout the whole episode. I think, a lot of us tend to chase the external things and wonder why we can't get them. I think from a final thought perspective, you have to become more to attract more. So if you want more success, you want more wealth, however you define it, you need to work on yourself. You want more happiness, you can't look for somebody else to make you happy. You have to learn to be content with your life in the present moment yourself. So I think, working on yourself and becoming more is much more important than chasing all these external things or relying on external factors.
100%. Oh, I love that. That was a high note. I absolutely agree with you 110%. Christian, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time and bringing all of your wealth of knowledge. I've dropped all of your information in the chat. I will also add it to the episode. I encourage anybody watching this, either live or recording, go and find Christian, like him, follow him, and go and pick up the book. You will not be disappointed. I love it. You're awesome. Thanks again, Christian.
Thanks for having me, Jax. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye.
Okay.
Wow. Always amazed with the guests that I am able to have on the show. That was amazing. One of the topics that I love to talk about is all about change, emotional intelligence. And a lot of that is because I have done so much work and so much change in my life that I have seen the impact. So if you're watching this and this impacted you, go ahead and hit like. Also, share this episode with others that you think can benefit from this. And if you haven't done so, I highly encourage you, again, go pick up the book. You will not be disappointed. I've read 75% of it. I really need to finish it. I'm usually a 5-book reader. So I have like 5 books and I rotate. So it's going to get back around. It's going to rotate back around and I'll eventually finish it out. Next week. So let's talk about what we've got going on next week. I'm really excited about this. So next week, I am going to be doing a military veterans transition talk. For anybody that's watching this for the first time that may not know, I'm a military veteran. I've served for over 18 years now. I do now cybersecurity and electronic warfare. And I really think it's important to demystify and talk about the military veterans transition and the challenges. And some of the guests on the show are they're all going to share their personal journeys through the military transition. Some are still serving active duty, and they're going to share their tips and tricks on what they've been doing to prepare them for that transition, because this is an area that a lot of people don't talk about. I also think it's really important just to understand the struggles when military, especially women, leave and they go into the civilian space, the changes and things that happen to us. So I'm really excited about this talk. I'm excited that we've got British Army James representing. So this will be a great discussion. Tune in. So next week, this will be Thursday again, 3:30 to 4:30. That's when we do the weekly shows every week on Thursdays. And if you notice that there are some changes up here and you weren't here last week, just to let you know, Outpost Gray is in partnership with Grant Thornton. Really excited about that. we have a global partner backing us. So none of the content's going to change. If anything, it's just going to get better because they're supporting Outpost Gray, which is awesome, but nothing's going to be censored. And we're going to be providing better information in innovation, technology, and cybersecurity. As always, you guys are the best. You guys are the reason that I do this. Now, from here, go over to Simply Cyber YouTube to Dr. Gerald Ogers. He's going to be going live in about 3 minutes, so you don't want to miss that. And when you hop in there, it would be awesome if you spammed his page by dropping in hashtag Outpost Gray. I know that he loves that so much. You guys are the best. I am signing out. Bye.